Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Cameron Fearey. He has the NABCEP PV Installation Professional. That's the PVIP certification. That's that super hard NABCEP exam. It's the hardest one, unless you consider the new NABCEP certification exam, which is the ESIP, which stands for Energy Storage Installation Professional. So Cameron is in New York. He's sort of in New York City. He's sort of close to there. And hello, Cameron. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for the introduction.
So let's talk a little bit more about you and kind of what you've been up to and stuff like that. So you've got a company, you're an owner, and it's called Indent Builders.
Yeah, and I'm a New York Sun company. So that means that I have my acceptance from the state.
They have sun in New York, really?
Yeah.
I'm just joking. That's acceptance from the state. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what that is, because there's so many states. What is there, like 52, if you include Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico? And what does that mean, the New York Sun program?
So just like other states have their own state incentive programs or management for solar, in New York, we have NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy and Research Development Association. And within that, their solar program is called New York Sun. So they provide incentives for installers and homeowners to help them to get solar for their homes or businesses. And in order to access those incentives, you need a qualified installer. And part of that qualification process is going through their applications, proving your experience, and having one of three certifications. And one of those three certifications is a NABCEP PVIP. So
cool.
I was able to get certified as a New York Sun installer by getting my NABCEP PVIP test passed.
Awesome. So I've heard about that. What are some of the other ways? You said there's 3 pathways?
Yeah, you can also get your UL PV installer certification.
Okay, I know about that one. I took that test.
And then there's also I think it's, what is the union?
Oh, the IBEW, perhaps?
Yeah. Yeah, if you have your IBEW journeyman, then you can also use that.
Great. Okay, and that stands for International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and that is the electricians union, and they're a very strong union throughout the country. So do you think a lot of people in New York are getting their PVIP for that? And it's only the PVIP, is it not the other NABCEP certifications?
Right. You can't just get the associate.
Yeah, the associate, or maybe like the design or something like that. It's got to be the
Yeah.
PVIP. All right.
It's
Well, that's
PVIP.
cool. I've known about that for a while. And so is that through NYSERDA, as they call it?
Yeah, New York Sun is a division of NYSERDA.
And then what does NYSERDA stand for?
It's the New York State Energy Research Development Association. I think that's right.
Yeah, and I know I've heard all about NYSERDA for many years. In fact, I think one time when I was doing some work for NABCEP, we were writing PVIP exam questions and stuff like that, and we met at NABCEP headquarters, and I think they were in the same office complex as NYSERDA. And I remember we went over there and checked out what they were doing and stuff like that. It's been a long time. It's been like, I don't know, between 10 and 15 years since that day, but that was pretty cool. And so let's talk about some other stuff that you've been doing and things like that. So you passed your PVIP. And how was that exam, just for people that haven't taken it yet?
What struck me is that I used pretty much the whole time on the test.
So that's 4 hours, 70 questions.
Yeah, I think it was like 3 hours and 40 minutes before I said, okay, I'm going to take a bathroom break and then check over my questions. And I had a few questions that I had left out. So I used like 3 hours and 55 minutes, including a short bathroom break.
So did you do it all online from your own computer?
Yeah, I didn't have my own NEC book either. They had the NEC book on the test. You could access it while you were in the test. And
Yeah.
I could search the test as well.
You could search the test? Like you could, what do you mean by that?
I think I could like do control find in the test in the booklet.
Like in the NEC or,
Yeah, and
oh, for the NEC on the test. Oh, that's really good to know. So Control F would
but
be how I do it with my computer.
I wasn't really dependent on the book, and it didn't help me if I didn't know where to look or if I didn't know how to solve the problem or the
Hmm.
question. It didn't help me. The open book part really didn't help because it would take me too much time to read through to find what I was looking for. So I would say I had to know how to solve each problem before going into the book to know where to look. If I didn't know how to solve the problem, it wasn't really helpful to have open book.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think maybe in another situation you could read through and try to figure all that out, but I found that if I didn't know the direction to go to solve the problem, it was better to skip it and come back and then make an educated guess later on.
So I'm also wondering how it goes with the bathroom break. I've never done a bathroom break during a NABCEP exam. And so I know that they're supposed to like re-secure the area, which means when you sit down for the first time, they secure the area and they turn the computer camera around in all different directions. And then they make you shine a mirror or your phone in selfie mode towards your computer so they could see that you're using the right computer and things like that. Did they do that for you
Yeah.
when you came back after the bathroom?
Yeah, I had to turn the whole computer around and show under my desk. I mean, if someone were to try to cheat, it would be very difficult. Like even if you could go look something up, I don't think it would be very helpful.
Yeah, it's like they
I
already
think
give you the NEC, right? What are you going to do? Go look at your NEC?
yeah, but I mean, I get why they do it, and I think it would not be a good test to try to cheat on.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be worth it, and you wouldn't know the stuff, and it'd be kind of difficult to do, taking a risk, all that stuff.
I think my attitude was I'd rather take a shot at the test and then pay the $100 to take it again
Hmm.
than just it'd be another practice test for me. So that's what I suggest to people is just to go for it and treat it as a practice test if you don't do well.
Yeah, that's a good attitude. I know that NABCEP used to only give the test once every 6 months. So that was kind of a big deal because it's like, oh, see you in 6 months. And now, since you can do it from your home at the testing center and all those things, it's not that 6 month wait. So, about when did you take the exam?
I believe it was October or November 2022.
Great. Yeah, and I remember how we met, and it was kind of interesting. And you gave me a call. I don't remember when that call was, but of course it was before the time you took your test. And you wanted an in-person PVIP class. And I was like, well, everybody's doing things online now, and you can't really just go do an in-person PVIP class like that. And also, I was trying to talk you into it too, because it's like, well, if you have the online, you can rewind it, you can do things over and over again. But I couldn't talk you into it. And then I told you that why don't you gather some people together and then we'll do a class. And that's what happened. And I thought you were like very ambitious towards getting to do that. And you brought together a classroom full of people. And in fact, you didn't have to even pay for the class yourself because that was just part of the deal. You went and found all these people and rounded them up. And
Ironically, I had already paid for your class online.
oh, okay. Well, good.
I bought the Heatspring class and
Uh-huh.
then I was like, I want to do this in person. I want that experience.
Yeah, and so we did a class, and the requirement for education is 58 hours. And so over 2 weeks, we did 58 hours, and it was in Dobbs Ferry. And what's the name of that county again? It's
Westchester County.
Westchester County. Yeah, that's right, because a lot of people know about Westchester County. And we did it in a library. And I remember, too, that it was not too long after COVID. And so the librarians and things were coming in, making sure people were wearing masks. And then after class every night, we went out for dinner. And it was just a fun experience. And I still see the people around that were in that class. So I got to hand it to you, too, for organizing that and setting it all up and making that happen. That was pretty good. And then you passed your test. So also awesome. Good for you. So that was great. And so maybe what we're going to do here too is just kind of talk a little bit about the NABCEP exams and also just letting people know that I have online classes through Heatspring that prepare people for every NABCEP certification exam that has to do with PV and energy storage. There are a couple of NABCEP exams that have to do with solar thermal and wind that I don't have exam prep classes for, but I don't know anybody that's even taken those exams. It's a different paradigm. Solar thermal has just gone out of style, and small wind also has gone out of style. Doesn't really pay off when compared to other things like PV because the price went down so much. And then there's that new energy storage installation professional exam that we just met. So anyway, we just mentioned too that there was the PVIP exam, that's PV Installation Professional, and I always recommend that people take that exam. First, I recommend they take the PV Associate exam. And Cameron, did you take the Associate exam?
No, I didn't.
All right, so Cameron, one thing I was going to ask you is, besides what we already talked about as far as the NABCEP PVIP helping you out with the New York State requirements, how has the NABCEP PVIP helped you for other things?
So before I got into this class with you, I was doing maintenance, I was doing troubleshooting, I was doing design. I was already involved in the operations of a solar company. And I just was learning how to do these things on the fly. And I was learning from other people who weren't NABCEP certified. I was learning from electricians. I was learning from people in the field. I didn't have a great sense of the NEC from like a trusted source. Coming in, I had some experience with design, especially with that was the thing I noticed. What had the biggest translation was doing the electrical line diagram design. So I had some experience with that. But going through the code book with you in the class really helped me to be very clear about where to look and making sure that I was referencing the code when I was doing these kinds of projects. So I think that was important, but also I think the class provided more of a network for who do I go to talk to, who do I go to for figuring out these kinds of problems, and what kinds of people do I need to ask to make sure that I'm following the code properly. I mean, I find that when I go into a conversation, I have a stronger basis for understanding the code than maybe someone who hasn't done the class. Even when I talk to master electricians, they're not as familiar with the solar portions of the code. That wasn't something that was part of their exam when they got their master electrician certification. So it's a different angle to approach the NEC. And I find that it ends up paying for itself really quickly. For example, I have a client right now that they are waiting on equipment, specifically a disconnect, and they're referencing a piece of code that says that they need to have arc fault protection in the fuse of the disconnect over 1200 amps. And it wasn't something that we went over in the class, but going through the class and talking to you, I have more information at my fingertips and more people at my fingertips to talk to about how to approach this code. And the problem is with this company is they can't get the equipment to satisfy the code as they see it. So having that flexibility and having people that I really trust, like you, and also going to classes at different conferences with you and Bill, it just gives me different tools to approach a problem. So
great.
I think that's where I see, okay, I can add $10,000, $20,000, $40,000 of value to a project just by how I approach it.
Cool. That's some good money, especially if you can make that much every day, like most of us PVIP people make, an extra, whatever you said, per day. That's
I don't know. I don't
per
think
hour. Yeah.
I would make that, but that's the amount of savings that I could provide someone.
Yeah. So I know that's super awesome. Of course, I was kidding about how much you would make in a day and all that kind of stuff. We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his Heatspring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. Yeah, one of the things that I tell people too about the NABCEP, why to get it and things like that, is you look at people that go to college, and a lot of times you could get the same job that somebody that didn't go to college. It's not like the job isn't just looking for the best person, but a lot of times they pick the person that went to college because the person that did go to college knows more, and they've proven themselves, and they've shown that they can study, and it sets goals also. So it's not like you would be studying as hard if you didn't have that test coming up and you weren't planning out all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of times I kind of compare it to like going to college, getting that NABCEP. It's a lot shorter than college. You're not going to school all that time. There's only, like for the NABCEP PVIP, the education requirement is 58 hours of training. And anybody's going to study a lot more than 58 hours to pass that PVIP exam, unless maybe they're already an engineer, been working in the solar industry for 10 years. Then they might not need to study at all, because there's some people that just know a whole ton of stuff already. But for the most part, a lot of these people wouldn't have studied so hard, and they wouldn't know all of that information. So
Yeah.
it's like setting some goalposts and things like that. And then plus, when you talk to people in the industry, or if people are trying to get a job or anything, they go, oh, I have the PVIP. Immediately, they're going to go, wow, this person really knows their stuff. In fact, even the PV Associate, which is way easier than the PVIP, at least it means something. And a lot of people are just impressed by that. And it's not anything bad. There's a lot of people that are bragging about their PVA, their PV Associate, and it really does make them a lot more qualified for the job, just knowing that they know what an IV curve is and what voltage and current and power and energy and all that kind of stuff. It sometimes amazes me that there's people in this industry that don't know the basics. They don't know the difference between volts and amps, and they've been working in this industry for a while. It's like, come on, give me a break. And they're like, well, I just answer the phones. But a lot of times the people that are answering the phones would be a lot better for their company if they did understand the basics. And a lot of times too, I just say that the average person that takes the associate exam, it's about a week's worth of your time to get that information that helps you pass that exam. And it's totally worth it. It's like the best investment that there is. The best investment, I always said, is the investment that you make in yourself, in education. Like, you don't go bankrupt someday and they go, we're going to take that knowledge out of your brain. You're going to always keep that, but they could take your house, they could take your bank account. Just like somebody cuts in front of you and you rear end their car and somebody gets hurt, it's like that could cost you $1 million. And it wasn't even your fault, but it's just bad luck.
I think something we should go through is like, what are the different options for classes on Heatspring?
So most people, or at least people that I recommend what to do, like they go, what should I do in this industry? A lot of times I say, if you really want to get into it, you would take the PV Associate before the PVIP. And then when people even ask me the question, should I just do the PVIP and forget the Associate? And a lot of times what I tell them is that it's a good idea to take the PV Associate first, just because it gets you familiar with the NABCEP testing platform. And if you do pass the Associate exam, then you get 18 hours of credit towards your PVIP. So it just seems like a pretty good way to do it. And the only difference in cost is $150 to take the associate exam. And there's all these different pathways that we have too. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just talk about some of these different PVIP bundles that we have over here in Heatspring. And so the first PVIP bundle that we have is one that would not include the associate. I'll just mention that one. And a lot of people do that one. And so they don't have to do the associate exam. And there's an 18-hour solar PV boot camp and a 40-hour advanced PV certification training class. And they will take both of those. And that 18-hour solar PV boot camp is very similar, almost the same as the PV associate exam prep course. And it's just registered with NABCEP differently. So if somebody registers for the course that's for the PV associate and they don't take the associate exam, then they don't get credit towards the PVIP. They have to pass the exam to get credit for that PV associate class. So let's just say that they don't want to take the associate exam, then they'll take the pathway that doesn't include the associate exam. And there's actually two of those pathways that don't include the associate exam, because we have another one that includes an energy storage associate boot camp. And sometimes the people that might take that class with the energy storage associate boot camp and the 40-hour advanced PV certification training. Those are the types of people that maybe they took the associate exam years ago and they still aren't going to get credit for it, and they just need to get those 58 hours. And the energy storage associate exam isn't going to count too much towards learning the material for the PVIP exam, but they just want to learn about energy storage. And a lot of times too, there are electricians and engineers and people that have been in the industry for a long time where they're not too worried about learning the basics. And also these bundles, what they include is a practice exam. And so I have a PVIP practice exam. It's just included in the bundles here, and we call it a bundle. And so they call them 3 courses, would have the 18, the 40-hour, and then the PVIP practice exam. And so I make a lot of exam questions. In fact, I was telling some people at NABCEP, I was recently, that I think I might write more exam questions than anybody, but they're all practice exam questions, and they're not exactly like the ones that are on the exam. You can't do that. It's against the rules. But I used to be on the PVIP exam committee, and so I know how to write the exam questions, and I make them myself. I'll just sit down and make some exam questions. And then also I make detailed explanations, which I think are very valuable. And people can take these practice exams. And I have like thousands of practice exam questions throughout all my courses. I have courses for every NABCEP certification. And so people will take the classes. And sometimes I even recommend people start off with glancing at the practice exams, because they're telling me like, well, I need to know what the exam looks like so I know how I can study. And I have all the practice exams that they can look at to have an idea, just a general idea of what it looks like. And so all the NABCEP exams, they have answers that are A, B, C, and D. And so you'll read the question and you'll have A, B, C, and D answers. And there's never going to be some answer that's like 2 of the above or all of the above. That's how these special psychometricians, and psychometrician means mind measurer, and a psychometrician is somebody with an advanced degree on how to write a test, and they will tell you how to do that. That kind of also reminds me of the way that they grade the exams, which is confusing because it's not a curve, it's not a percentage, it's called scaled scoring, and it's more like a curve, I would say, than anything else. But it's just a little bit different, and it's hard to explain. It's almost impossible to explain. I've looked it up many times on the internet, and they just have somebody that really knows how to write exam questions, and they figure out how to grade it based on who knows the information and who does not know the information. So if you have a smart group of people taking the test and a smarter group of people taking the test, if it was a curve and it was different groups, then they would, equal numbers would pass, and it kind of wouldn't be fair to the smarter people versus the smart people. So anyway, that's my little thing about these exams here. And there's a lot of other exams too. There's all these different bundles for all the different NABCEP exams. We have the PV Design Specialist bundle, and that would prepare people for taking the NABCEP PVDS. And a lot of times too, I tell people that the PV Design Specialist is very similar to the PVIP. And sometimes people, I think, are a little concerned about taking the PVIP because it sounds like installation professional, like I'm the guy on the roof and I'm really the guy in the office. And that's how it is for most people that are taking the PVIP. And I think it just goes back historically, the way that it was in the earlier days when NABCEP started, where a solar company was 2 guys in a pickup truck doing the whole thing, and they were selling, designing, installing, and there was batteries and all that kind of stuff. And so the name kind of stuck. Well, they used to call it the PV Installer exam, and then they called it the PV Installation Professional. So that's what we have there. So what do you think, Cameron?
Yeah, I think just I want to simplify what people are looking at or what we're talking about here. I mean, there's the PV Associate, and then there's a whole bunch of other certifications that are kind of in between a PV Associate and a PVIP. And from my perspective, if you're going to go for anything beyond for the PV Associate, you would try to get the PVIP. And possibly now there's this new certification that I'm going to get is the ESIP, the Energy Storage Installation Professional. But unless there's like a very specific reason to get one of those, like a PV designer or a PV inspector, or like those all will look good and have slightly different focuses. But I think, would you agree that the PVIP would be, if you could get it, that's like the gold standard?
Yeah, the PVIP is the gold standard, and the ESIP is brand new. In fact,
Yeah.
there's nobody that has officially been ESIP certified at the time of this recording, but by the time we release it, that will be different. And so it's called the Energy Storage Installation Professional Exam, and it's a brand new one, and it's different. Also, at the time of this recording, NABCEP is still on the 2017 NEC, and there's been no official announcements of switching to a new version of the NEC. And I keep asking them. In fact, I asked NABCEP about 10 days ago, and they don't have any official announcements to make about switching from versions of the NEC, and also about what version the NEC that we're on. I encourage people to not worry too much about that, because the NEC is mostly the same, and the people that are writing the test questions aren't trying to trick you on going like, aha, we caught you because this word was different in the 2020 versus the 2017 NEC. They're not really writing test questions based on code changes. Sometimes they unintentionally might have something that would be outdated because they don't know what the future code is when they write an exam based on the old code. And it's not too common in the industry, and even like for electrician exams, for the exam based on an older version of the code. It makes it easier for the test writers and things like that. And then there's states that are still on the 2008 NEC right now as we speak in 2024. Can you believe it? Like that far back. And that's just the way that it is. And nobody adopts it right away, except for Massachusetts is the only state that adopts the NEC right away. And so they adopt the 2023 NEC right on January 1st, 2020. And so everybody is on the 2017 NEC when they're studying for a NABCEP exam, except for the Energy Storage Installation Professional exam. And this exam, it uses the 2020 NEC. And the other thing too is they don't have a copy that's in the testing platform. So you have to bring your own, and you're supposed to bring an NEC code book, not an NEC handbook, and it's not supposed to have any tabs in it. It's not supposed to have anything but highlighter in it, and you can bring that with you to the exam. And when the proctor is looking at you through your webcam, if you're taking the exam at home, they want you to hold up the book and flip through some pages just to make sure that you're not doing handwriting in that NEC, or there's not tabs there or anything like that. And then there's also two other books that you can take with you. And one of them is NFPA 855. So NFPA 855 is called the Standard for the Installation of Stationary Energy Storage Systems. And there is a 2023 version. However, the NABCEP exam for the Energy Storage Installation Professional lets you bring in the 2020 version, or at least that's what they're recommending to bring for when you're taking the test. So that's NFPA, that stands for National Fire Protection Association, 855. I think like the letters ESS look like 855 if you blur your eyes a little bit, if you have bad vision. So that's the way to remember what to use. And I was surprised when I took the ESIP. I really could have used that 855. And the reason that I was surprised is nobody has ever adopted 855. Like no state has adopted 855. So it's not an adopted thing. It's a standard. It's not a code. It's not the code for installing energy storage systems. Also, it's interesting too that there's no standard for installing PV systems like NFPA 856 or whatever it would be. Maybe it should be NFPA 690. And one of the things about this standard is it's like they take the International Building Code, the International Fire Code, and the International Residential Code and put the energy storage stuff in here. And so I do talk about this in classes that I teach, and I'm also fine-tuning this and putting more of this into my energy storage classes. And that's another thing is I'm going to sit down with Bill Brooks pretty soon, and perhaps already by the time that this is released, and do a bunch of 855 stuff. And it is not something that's adopted. It's something that might be used when somebody installs an energy storage system. Like, so if there's an EPC and they have a contract to install a big energy storage system, they might be required by that contract to do it according to 855. And a lot of times the 855 stuff is also incorporated in the building and fire codes. Like I said, the ICC codes, which are published by a different organization. So we call it the ICC codes for the International Code Council, and they compete with NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. The most widely adopted code probably in the world is NFPA 70, which is the National Electrical Code. And then there's another one that they let you take with you to the Energy Storage Installation Professional exam, and that is NFPA 70E, the standard for electrical safety in the workplace. So think of being safe in the workplace, NFPA 70E. And so it's like you take NFPA 70, which is the National Electrical Code, you put an E in it, and it's completely different. And it's a standard also, once again, so you know, and I know, that we're supposed to comply with the OSHA requirements. That's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. That's U.S. federal requirements. And we don't have an OSHA book that we can take with us in the exam, so they have us do 70E. And I also didn't bring that for the exam, and you know what? I really could have used those books that I didn't expect. And so I brought with me an NEC copy, which I already know a lot already anyway. I've been studying that for many, many years. But there are these other books that you can take with you for a NABCEP exam, which is weird. And I recommend actually taking them, and they cost a lot of money. You know, you could spend some dough. I think it's like, if you add it all up, it might be like $450, $500 in books. I was thinking one thing that I might do is get all 3 copies and then rent them out to friends, you know, people that are taking the tests, people that are taking my classes and things like that. And then we can pass them around. I'm not sure how that would work. And, you know, you could say, like, once this person is done with it, they send it to the next person. But then what if they delay their test? So it could be complicated, because that's a lot of dough to throw out there. And then there's a lot of people like me. In reality, I don't ever use the hard copies except for taking a test, because I get them all online. You know, I do different things like the NFPA link, I do up codes, and I do the ICC, the International Code Council version of all this stuff too. So that was what was a little bit different for this. And another thing too that we should mention for these NABCEP exams is most of these NABCEP exams require an OSHA 10. And so that's a 10-hour OSHA course, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And so we're talking about people taking these construction safety courses where you learn about ladders and stuff like that. And that's a requirement to sit for most of these NABCEP exams. However, if you're taking the PVCMS exam, that one requires the OSHA 30. So that's a 30-hour one. And if you do have the OSHA 30, of course, that would count for the OSHA 10 requirement. So if somebody wants to take all the NABCEP exams and get more letters after their name than the alphabet, then they might want to just start off with the OSHA 30 exam. So anyway, that's a little bit about the ESIP, the Energy Storage Installation Professional. And while we're at it, I guess we might as well talk about some of these other exams. And there is the PV Design Specialist. And I would say that it's sort of a toss-up between the difficulty of the PV Design Specialist and the PV Commissioning and Maintenance Specialist. And we use the letters for there, and we call those abbreviations. If it's spelled out something like NABCEP, then we call that an acronym, but we don't say for PVDS, we don't go PVIS, or however you would pronounce that. And so for the PVDS, same thing. We have a course for that, and it has different requirements. There's also all these requirements that you could look up on the NABCEP website, and you go to the NABCEP Certification Handbook, and you can see what all the requirements are for those NABCEP exams. And so the people that are taking the Design Specialist exam, they might be PV designers. PV Commissioning and Maintenance Specialist exams, they would be good at troubleshooting, like what you said that you used to do, Cameron. And then there's the PV Technical Sales exam. And this is a really important one, I think, and it's not as difficult as most of the certification exams as far as studying to pass it, but I just think that it is really important. And the reason for that too is there's so many people out there selling solar that don't understand it. They don't understand it at all. And then you see all over the internet, there's people that are complaining and getting ripped off and things that are making us all look bad as an industry. So I always recommend too that people look up anybody selling solar, or at least the company. And it's great if they have at least the PV technical sales or something better than that, or at least somebody from their company has that. That's all very important. And for the salesperson too. And so there's requirements for, making proposals and selling systems and all that to even qualify for some of these exams. And they might take the PV associate first. One of the things that I do when I get these calls from people all the time, they probably fill up your inbox too, and they're trying to sell leads. And once in a while, I pick up the call because my spam filter on my phone doesn't work. And I say, oh yeah, you're selling leads? That's great. I want to make sure that your people are PV technical sales certified though. And they go, oh yeah, they are. And I was like, that's great. That's awesome. So what's their names? Or I want to look them up on the NABCEP website, and they're just lying. They're not certified. So if somebody lies about being certified, then they're just a bunch of liars. And at least they should have the NABCEP associate.
You want to show looking up someone with their directory?
Okay, so let's go. I'm at nabcep.org on the website right now. And then I go to middle top, and it says professional directories. And then under that, once I hover over that, I get board certified, associate directory, or companies directory. Some companies even have a NABCEP certification. But I'm just going to go to professional directories because I want to see them all. And then I'm going to go, I understand. And then what I can do here too is I could look them up by their name. And so I'm going to look you up. And so Cameron, Fear, and it already pops up, Fearey. And so I can see you right here. So you see how quickly that went up. And you can also do it by zip code. You can do it by city. You can do it how far away somebody is. And so it has you listed, it has your number, and then it even has a contact button too. So if somebody wants to contact you, they would fill out this form and you would get an email.
Yeah. So, I went on here the other day because I'm looking to hire a PV associate. And what was really nice is that I could go through and click on PV associate directory, and I could filter by how far away they were. So I'm in New York, so I put my radius at 5 miles, and I could see all the different PV associate people within 5 miles. And last week, I interviewed someone who had their PV associate, and something I found was that it's someone who gets their PV associate normally isn't somebody who just decided they want to do solar and then got their PV associate the next week. Normally, they're people that have been in it and they realize this is something that's worthwhile. And so what I found was that he had a lot more experience than just the PV associate. He was able to do modeling for commercial projects, and that was really interesting. And I'm going to work with him on modeling commercial projects in the city now. And I was hiring people who didn't have their PV associate, and now I've been starting to reach out to people on here because it's such a good foundation to have someone to work with. I mean, even if it's just on permitting, having that background, it's so helpful for, even if someone costs more money, it's really helpful for just getting the ball moving. Someone who knows what we're talking about when we talk about just basic electrical or basic design. It's really helpful for having someone to have just to hire for administrative work. So
yeah, it's a very exclusive club. People that have passed NABCEP exams, and we're in tight with each other. So I just did a search for New York City for the PV associate, just kind of like what you were talking about. And there's a ton, but that's because New York City is a big city, so there's a whole lot there. But it starts off with the one that's closest and the one that's the next farthest away. So I guess when you enter New York City, it's got to pick some spot. I'm not sure what street it is or anything like that, but it does have people that are like 0.16 miles, 0.74 miles. But if I entered where I am, I could go just my zip code. And so I live in a place called Orinda, and I can see the people that have the associate and how far they are away from me. So I'm the only person in my town, and then I could see there's somebody in the next town over called Lafayette, and then over the hill there's a bunch in Oakland and Berkeley, and so I can see all of these different people and how far away they are. And I've actually gone on here too, and I've been looking for people to help me translate classes. And I did a search for Mexico. And I found people in Mexico because I was like, well, people in Mexico are going to be good at translating. And so now there's people that are translating my classes into Espanol, amigos. And that is going to be awesome. We're going to make a big announcement when that gets finalized and we have a product that's ready to go. But it's really fun, and I have multiple people working on different lessons too. So there's a lot of people that speak Spanish, and especially in this industry, so it'll be great to have that work. So
That's
awesome.
In terms of the other courses, I think, could you say a little bit more about this technical C&I sales certification?
Yeah, so we're talking about PV technical sales, and what we have is different pathways. And we have one pathway for the technical sales that has classes from not just me, but also from my buddy Tim. And so Tim Montague is teaching the C&I course right here, and that's part of the package. And so C&I stands for commercial and industrial. And also Tim's got a podcast too, so people are listening to us on a podcast, and you can look at Tim's, and it's called the Clean Power Hour, and he's a lot of fun. He's had me on his podcast a few times. And so there's different pathways. And so there's some pathways that just have me, some pathways that have different people for the PV technical sales. There's other ones too. There's classes like for the PV installer specialist certification. There's not a whole lot of people that have taken that one. The PV system inspector certification, that one's for inspectors. I have a pathway for that. I have some pathways that aren't even preparing people for exams. There's one pathway that has me doing some of the classes that's an FAA class, and they have a drone pilot who's actually a real pilot too. I'm actually a real pilot too. I could fly an airplane. Can you believe that? Would you trust me? Would you let me fly you over the bay, the San Francisco Bay? I've done it. I've flown over the Golden Gate Bridge all by myself. And so you learn about airspace and all that. Drones are a big thing in all kinds of industries, especially solar. It's pretty neat. You can determine shading, site surveys. You can have infrared cameras to figure out where there's problems with solar modules and all that kind of stuff. Then there's another one. You mentioned the UL certification. And so UL certification, I would say, sort of competes with NABCEP, but NABCEP's won the game. Not too many people know about UL solar certification, but I took that exam, and I have a class that prepares people and practice exams and all that kind of stuff too. So there's a whole lot of different of these bundles that we have for all these different things. And of course, people can take the classes all by themselves. And I know too, Cameron, that you have sent a lot of people over to take these classes.
Yeah, when I hire installers or subcontract installers, one of the first things I ask them, or within a few minutes, I'm asking them, what's the 120% rule for a backfed breaker?
Uh-huh.
And if they don't know that, I know that, like, best case scenario, they're just like a handy installer. They don't know why they're doing things the way they're doing them. So
Yeah, you know what I've noticed a lot of times too is there are a lot of really good installers that don't understand any of this stuff, but they're really good at like putting racks together and flashing and all that kind of stuff. But the question I have for them is like, you could be making double or triple or quadruple, and you could be much more beneficial to your company, and you would probably get tired of being on the roof after so many years. If you did get one of these certifications, you'd be more likely to be crew leader and stuff like that, because people don't want to be 60 years old and installing racks. Nothing wrong with installing racks. It's a great job. It's the best views in the world, and it's a great way to get started in the industry. I think everybody should have an installation experience like that.
Yeah, I think I interviewed probably 30 people this past year as for a crew lead. None of them had their PV installation professional, and I only ended up hiring one, and he was the one who was willing to learn, and he had the most experience, but he didn't know, it would have been so much easier to just hire someone who had their PVIP, and they had to rely on my PVIP knowledge to make sure the installations went well. So I had to train them to get up to speed on the solar code. And it's just so much easier when you know someone's got that experience. And also, I have a bunch of electricians who benefited from doing the PVIP course, like 690 and 710.
Yeah, so 690 is photovoltaic systems. That's the article for PV in the National Electrical Code.
Yeah, even though they're studying the electrical code, they're not as familiar with those parts. So interconnection and PV systems, it changes how you do your installs, and you lose money if you don't do it right. I mean, there's thousands of dollars that I've seen of companies that I've started to work with who they're wasting money because they don't know the code.
It's crazy how like people waste money saving money.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of tens of thousands of dollars off the top of my head. Just now, I mean, someone who's a crew lead might not care about that because they don't see the profit, but on the job necessarily, but somebody who owns a company would. And if you're a crew lead and you can show your company that you're saving the money, it's going to reflect well on you as well. So I think that it's silly to not get that experience and have someone who's, you can learn it all on your own, learn a lot of it on YouTube or in the field, but it makes a big difference.
I was interviewing somebody recently, and I could just tell that they didn't understand the technical parts. And they were an executive in some company. And it was a little bit probably embarrassing and things like that too, because they didn't understand the basics of what their company was doing. And so I think that it's super important too that the people that have these business degrees and they're like professional C-level executives and things like that, that they understand at least the basics.
Yeah.
So everybody from the guy on the roof, person answering the phones, the C-level executives. And another thing too is like, I can tell when there's like a good company, the type of company that is going to get no complaints versus a company that's just trying to make a quick buck. And the really good companies, they'll send their people to take the NABCEP exams because they want to make sure that they have the best people. And also those kind of companies like that too, where the people will stick around the longest because their companies are taking care of them, they're paying for their education, and that's just really good for everything for the company. It's like that one investment. They can't steal from you yet. Put some electrodes in the brain maybe, but we're working on it.
I have some people who have actually taken the course or have bought the course, but they haven't followed through and taken the test. I think they're right there on the edge. And I think that, what would you say to someone who's right?
I get some people too, like on all levels. Like it could be like the super beginner level of somebody that's like didn't finish high school and they're really afraid of taking a test. And a lot of times I go and I teach these classes for workforce development type of class. It's grant driven and things like that. And I'll be like, you're going to qualify for the test, tell them the rules. Once you sign up for the exam, you have 6 months to take it. You don't have to sign up for the exam right away. You could wait a year and things like that. But like, I've never seen anybody wait a year and then take the test. Like they're going to forget more than they learn. And a lot of people have good intentions that they're going to study all the time, and then they just don't study all the time. I do see people also that are like really good solar designers, and they sign up for the class or their company signs them up for the class, and they don't do it because they're too busy. And so one of the things that they can do is they can extend it. And so the class, on the Heatspring class, it lasts for a year, like everything lasts for a year, and then it's $19 a month to extend it. And so we do get a few people out there that extend it for the $19 a month. Or if they say they went 2 years, I think they can just pay $19 for the next month. And so there's ways to bring it back to life. And I'm always updating the courses and things too. And I even have the courses, even if somebody finishes the class and they get the certification, they can go back and look at their class for up to a year without even having to pay the $19 a month. They call that the membership. And another thing too is when companies do it, they'll have somebody that can look at what they're doing, like their director of education or whatever you might want to call it. And then that person can say, hey, Cameron, I see that you're not really moving forward with this course. And that also just gives people an incentive to move forward with something because they know somebody's watching them. And
Yeah.
I'm watching them too. I could see see what they're doing, or if they finish the course and all that kind of stuff.
When I approach any new job that I'm doing these days, I don't think it's not as important that I memorize the data from the exam as that I have my process for figuring it out, because there's still stuff in the code books that I haven't memorized. I think even really good
Right.
master electricians haven't memorized everything, but if they have a process, a
Yeah, I've
connection.
never met anybody that memorized everything. Like even anybody that could memorize all the individual articles, or I should say sections in 690, like 690.12 rapid shutdown, but could list those off. One time I made some flashcards and sort of did it. And then Bill Brooks was laughing at me for doing that. That's why we have books. It's like when they first invented the calculator, it was considered cheating to use a calculator on an exam. And now it's what you just use a calculator on an exam, unless you're in third grade or something, doing your times tables.
Yeah, what are you looking for? How do you solve this problem? How do we solve having a disconnect in outside when there's no place to put it? I think any of those situations in a real life scenario have a significant financial impact. And so I don't think that the memorization is as important as being able to figure it out. And I think any of these courses give you context to figure out these problems in a way that makes sense. And then you can just build on that. Like if for me, I'm always looking for new equipment, new products to make the job more cost effective or higher performing. So I think this gave me a really good foundation to figure that out and to know what I'm looking for and to see how I can comply with the NEC, or sometimes I need to comply with the utility. And that's what this course really gives you a great foundation for, especially PVIP.
Awesome. So I think we covered a lot of stuff except for our Italian class. Can you believe it? We have an Italian class that is a translation of the NABCEP PV Associate Boot Camp. So all those people out there that are speaking Italian, there you go. We've got the class for you. It's translated by my good friend Giulia Soriano, if I'm pronouncing that right. I just pronounced it like I just fake any accent. And so, Cameron, what can people do to find you on the internet? I know you're in a lot of different places where I've seen you. So how can people find you, Cameron Fearey?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch. You can also go to my website, indentbuilders.com.
That was indentbuilders.com. And for LinkedIn, could just probably just search your name, CAMERONFEAREY.
Yeah, and I help companies design and procure, and I can help project manage depending on what the project is. I love helping people get set up with their education. So if you have questions about the course, or if you want to be involved with any of the companies that I work with in this area, New York City projects, I love using new projects. I love using new materials, and I love doing like canopies and energy storage. And I'm always trying to learn more about different products. And I normally go to the RE Plus and Intersolar trade shows. So hopefully see some of you there.
Yeah, I always like to see you at those trade shows and have a lot of fun there. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. To find out more, go to Solar, SEAN. That's solarshawn.com. And you can find out there about classes, all these different places where you get all this great information, because we are in the business of education. That's right, sticking stuff to your brain cells. Get smart.